So, I need to tell you about something that still makes my jaw drop when I think about it. Something I never thought I'd actually say out loud. My property got raided by cops. Only, it wasn't real cops. It was Wasatch, HOA cops. Yes, you heard that right. Homeowners Association cops. They showed up in bulletproof-looking vests, armed with clipboards that looked official but were faker than a $3 bill. And the funniest, or maybe scariest, part, they thought they were walking into my trap. Turns out, it was their trap that walked right into mine. Let me back up and start from the beginning. But first, tell me, where are you listening from today? Because wherever you are, I want you to picture this. You've chased a dream for so long that the moment you finally touch it, you can't believe it's real. That was me, sitting on the porch I built with my own 2 hands, holding a mug of coffee that wasn't mine, looking out over 120 acres I'd bought with sweat, blood, and a few scars that would never fully heal. No boss breathing down my neck, no 4 a.m. alarms, no random strangers yelling into my life. Just me, my dogs, my goats, a tractor that was older than some of my bones, and quiet. Real, heavy, peaceful quiet. Not the kind that makes you twitchy. The kind that sinks into your bones and says, yes, you're home. When I bought this ranch, I thought that was it. Peace, freedom, no more conflicts. I was wrong. It started with a sign. Just a small, white plastic sign, sit tied to my fence like it had every right to be there. Notice, property under review. Simmons Valley, HOA, compliance required. I stared at it for a full minute, hoping it would explain itself. It didn't. I ripped it down, threw it into the fire barrel, and muttered something about bored kids or some HOA cosplay nonsense. Mistake number 1, underestimating how far people will go when they think a clipboard gives them ultimate power. Mistake number 2, assuming Karen would stop. The very next day, her SUV rolled onto my gravel driveway. Hospital white, parked halfway like it was some kind of tactical formation. Out stepped Karen Simmons herself. Pastel pink blouse, pressed khakis, mirrored sunglasses, and a clipboard tucked under her arm like it was a weapon. She didn't look at my property. She looked at me like I was a problem she had to solve. Hi there, she chirped like we were about to swap cookie recipes. I wiped my hands on a rag and leaned on a fence post. Help you? Karen's smile widened. I'm Karen Simmons, HOA president. Just doing my rounds. Thought I'd personally welcome you to the neighborhood. I blinked. HOA, yes, she said. Simmons Valley Homeowners Association. We're a chartered community coalition focused on maintaining visual and environmental standards across properties. I laughed. Out loud. This is farmland, I said. The only visual standard out here is not crashing into cows. She didn't flinch. Our bylaws cover fencing height, structure types, livestock ratios, and noise thresholds. Currently, we're in an awareness phase, but citations will begin at the end of the month. I shook my head. Lady, you can't cite a goat. She smiled sweetly. Oh, we don't cite the goats, just their owners. Then she handed me a manila envelope labeled welcome packet, action required, and spun on her orthopedic heel, leaving like she'd just dropped off a jury summons. I opened it immediately. Pages of fake regulations, diagrams of my barn, red circles around my fencing from angles I didn't even know existed. Satellite dish visible from a southern view corridor. Apparently a violation, I didn't just throw it away, I burned it. 2 days later, new signs appeared. Bigger, laminated, zip-tied, one nailed to my barn door. Under enforcement review, violations pending. I tore them down again. Then came the men. 2 of them, mid to late 30s, khakis, vests with iron-on patches that read HOA Patrol. They walked my fence line with walkie-talkies and clipboards, like they were on some kind of covert mission. One pointed at my tractor and muttered into his radio. I stepped off the porch. They froze. "Something I can help you with, boys?" I asked. One spoke, shaky, rehearsed. "We're conducting a compliance sweep under HOA protocol." I got closer. "Got a badge?" "We operate under the Simmons Valley Charter." "Great. Then you're trespassing under the Callahan Property Charter. Leave." They left, but not before one of them dropped his clipboard. Inside were patrol maps, marked properties, and mine labeled Alpha, high resistance. I snapped a photo and called a local sheriff's deputy friend. He laughed. "Karen." "Oh yeah. She tried reporting the feed store last year for a noise disturbance. She's got plans, trust me, plans." That word stuck. Karen's plans didn't end with laminated signs. They included men with vests, walkie-talkies, fake websites, and maybe worse. So I prepared not for war, but for nonsense. Motion sensors, trail cameras, remote lights. Nothing lethal, just enough to remind anyone crossing that line that this land bites back. And sure enough, they came again, before dawn. Silent, confident, ready to enforce their HOA fantasy. But they didn't know. They walked into my rules now. You never forget the rhythm of trouble moving quietly. Crunch, pause. Crunch, coordinated, measured, almost too deliberate. I didn't panic. Grabbed my boots and a mug of yesterday's reheated coffee. Muscle memory. I didn't need to see them to know they were here. I stepped into the kitchen, flicked off lights, quieted my breathing. Crunch, pause, crunch. 5, maybe 6 of them. Out by the barn, 5 shadows moving in a lazy arc. Flashlights off, radios in vests, khakis. One carried a clipboard. Of course. Even pretend commandos need paperwork. 3 veered toward the east fence where Linda, the goat, slept like royalty. 2 lingered near the front gate. Then a radio crackled. Team Alpha in position. Begin sweep. Target presumed armed but compliant under Phase 1. I chuckled. What do you even do when your neighborhood watch thinks they're raiding Osama bin Farmer? But the laugh didn't reach my eyes. Something in me shifted. Old hum returned. Awareness, breath coiled, eyes sharp. Training from a past life sneaking back in. I grabbed my mudroom coat, flipped the emergency light trigger in my pocket. Not because I needed it, because I wanted to see their faces when they realized they weren't the ones in charge here. They crossed the second fence, quiet, confident, until click, tripwire, then boom. Not an explosion, a flood of light and sound. High-beam floodlights exploded like I'd summoned the sun. Sirens screamed from every corner. The barn lit up like Times Square. 2 guys dropped flat. One dove behind the water trough, screaming. Another collided with Linda's enclosure. Bad move. Linda rammed him in the thigh, flipped him over, and glared like she expected him to explain himself. I stepped onto the porch. Didn't rush, didn't yell, just sipped my coffee and said, Good morning, gentlemen. You're all planning to announce yourselves, or were you hoping for the element of surprise? One of them straightened. Clipboard guy. We are acting under HOA Emergency Code 7A, two-size non-compliant property. Emergency Code 7A. I raised an eyebrow. Did you all make that up in a coloring book? He didn't flinch. We are empowered by community vote to remove unauthorized estristus, reclaim misuse of land, and enforce property value security. You're going to enforce it with that clipboard. Another one, shaking, sweating, raised something. It looked like a taser. This is a citizens' enforcement zone, he said, voice cracking. We are within operational bounds. I took one step down from the porch. You're in my yard, armed, threatening seizure of property under fake laws printed on a library computer. Clipboard guy pulled out a folder. This document authorizes us. I snatched it. Half the pages said draft. One had a coffee stain and what looked like a slice of melted cheese stuck to the corner. This looks like it was written by a sleep-deprived 10th grader with control issues. Suddenly, gravel, tires, a car, but not one of theirs. Sheriff Langston. Red and blue lights stuttered down the driveway like divine intervention. Squad car rolled in slow and loud. The HOA enforcers froze. Clipboard guy turned. Abort, but it was too late. Langston stepped out, squinting into the chaos. One of the fake cops was still being screamed at by Linda. Another had buried his face in the dirt like it offered legal protection. Langston looked at me, deadpan. Callahan, what the hell is this? Pre-re theater, I said. Opening act. HOA SWAT team. Langston turned to the group. Hands where I can see them. Dropped clipboards. One guy actually said, we're acting under civilian compliance restricti. Langston walked right up, grabbed the badge on his vest, and ripped it clean off. Buddy, this SAS compliance officer, Tier 2. You're lucky it doesn't say more cop. He held up Abender. Leather-bound, homemade. The cover, Simmons Valley. Compliancy Authority, Internal CAD. Langston flipped through color-coded charts, rank structure, lamination, God help me. There were pages labeled violation classes. Langston read aloud. Class Owner Violation, Fencing Misalignment. Class 2, Unauthorized Rooster Activity. Class 3, Hostile Resident Behavior. He snapped the book shut. I've seen cults with fewer rules. One guy blurted out. We were told to enforce protocol by who? Tyrants. Langston glanced at me. I said it first. Karen. 3 arrests, 2 citations, 1 full report filed with the county investigator. But the kicker, Langston found a list tucked in the binder, a spreadsheet with names. Mine highlighted red. Obstructionist. High threat. Others crossed out. Langston whistled. You know any op these? Yeah, I said neighbors. 2 sold out this year. 1 went dark. This isn't just HOA cosplay. He said this is coordinated, targeted. He sighed. I'll call in a fraud investigator. Maybe even the feds, but you should know. Karen's doubling down. She's not quitting. I already knew because later that night a certified letter landed in my mailbox. Karen. She was suing me for hostile disruption of a sanctioned community action, for undermining volunteer enforcement personnel, for intentional obstruction of cooperative land reclamation, and the worst part, she had a real lawyer. Someone was funding her, someone with more reach than a folding table and a clipboard. and tucked inside the envelope was a list of names. Not just mine, not just neighbors, but one name I knew better than anyone. Someone I'd shared beers with, someone who helped build my barn, and next to their name, a single word, informant. They say power corrupts, but what nobody tells you is how fast it happens when the only thing standing between someone and total control is a clipboard. Karen didn't fold after the arrests. She didn't back down. She doubled down and dragged the whole damn neighborhood with her. It started with the flyers. She didn't just post them in mailboxes. She launched them, printed in grayscale, clipped 2 plastic stakes, and stabbed into the ground at the entrance to the road like military signage. Each one had a photo of my property. Aerial shot, probably from a drone, labeled Zone B, non-compliant, high risk. Below that, bullet points, unauthorized livestock, illegal fencing configuration, documented verbal hostility to enforcement officers. Then the best part, subject has refused all attempts at reintegration. Neighbors are advised to avoid unsanctioned contact. I couldn't believe it. She was distributing social exile notices. But, worst of it, it worked. Neighbors who used to wave stopped making eye contact. The guy who sold me fed quietly, raised his prices. One of the families who came to my 4th of July cookout last year posted a message in the community group. We support order. We support community standards. If you're not part of the solution, you're a part of the risk. I stood in my field, staring at a sign about my hostile goat sand, realized this wasn't a petty feud anymore. Karen was building a regime, and then she held the rally in her driveway. No chairs, no permits, just a fold-out table, a microphone, and a poster board that read, Emergency Compliance Briefing, Tier 3 Response. I stood across the street, didn't hide, just watched. At least 15 people showed up. Some looked confused, some looked scared. A few were already wearing HOA branded safety vests. Karen tapped the mic. We're under siege, she said, and it's coming from within. She held up one of the flyers with my property photo. This resident has refused compliance for 3 consecutive review cycles. He has verbally threatened officers. He has refused dialogue. She pointed at me. He thinks she's untouchable, but no one is above the rules. She passed out flyers like a communion wafers. He may call it freedom. We call it negligence. We call it disorder. I shouted across the road. You call a goat screaming at 6 a.m. a security threat. Karen ignored me. Effective immediately, the HOA is initiating a community ESA. Residents are discouraged from contact. No favors, no support, no engagement. The crowd nodded. Some clapped. That was when I realized it wasn't just propaganda. She had followers. Later that night, I found a notice in my mailbox. It wasn't mailed. It was laminated. Resident classification Tier 3, critical non-compliant. Under it, removal Vestock, paint barn, neutral grey, attend re-education seminar, and submit topology statement to board. There was even a time and date listed for the seminar. Location, Karen's garage. On-off the sessions was called Silent Fences. How your property speaks for you. I nearly choked. This was Orwell with a polo shirt, but it got worse. 2 of my trail cams went offline the next day, then a third. When I checked Theoring, they'd been cut. Langston came out. You think it's her. She's the only one who knows where I put these. He nodded. She's not just posturing anymore. That night, A white sedan parked 2 properties down, didn't move. I watched it through binoculars. Tinted windows, no tags, just idling. I walked toward it with a flashlight. The engine revved and it peeled out. The plates registered to something called Community Horizon Outreach. The director, Karen, she'd built a shell non-profit just to cover surveillance. And then came Max, my dog. Border Collie, 8 years old, smarter than most people I've worked with. That night I heard him whimpering near the barn. I found him behind the ATV, shaking, one paw bleeding. He yelped when I touched it. Blood, deep cut, embedded glass. I checked the barn floor, found it. Jagged shards scattered near the rear door. Green-brown glass purposefully hidden. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just picked him up and whispered, "It's okay. I've got you." Langston arrived 20 minutes later. Hess swept the area, took samples. "This wasn't an accident," he said. "This was a message." And he was right, because I'd reached my line and Karen had just danced over it. The next day, I went public. I uploaded everything. The video of the fake raid, the fake seizure warrants, her flyers, Max's injury, surveillance logs, the HOAS law book, and laminated re-education guides. It posted it with a caption, "When the HOA thinks they're the FBI." Within hours, the video exploded. Comments, shares, messages from other rural homeowners, seeing the same tactics in their areas. Within 24 hours, it had over 300,000 views. People started turning. Karen's online defenders vanished. Her compliance team, half of them resigned. But she wasn't done, because 2 days later, she showed up at my door. No clipboard, just a manila folder. "Nosmal, you think this is about goats?" I said nothing. "You think this ends with—" She stepped forward, voice low. "You've kicked something you don't understand." She handed me the folder, then walked away. Inside, printed emails, signed memos, a document labeled Adreginal Initiative, Rural Behavioral Management, Phase 2. It had government seals, contacts I recognized, people I'd worked with years ago. It wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore. This wasn't local. This was federal. That folder didn't just implicate Karen. It exposed something bigger. A plan, a network. And my name was listed as primary resistance node. They thought I'd be easy to silence. They forgot who I used to be and what I still am. The folder sat on my kitchen table for 6 hours before I opened it again. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find, because I already knew what it meant. It had government headers, agency abbreviations, real formatting, not the stuff Karen printed at the UPS store. The top page, Rural Behavioral Management, Phase 2. I stared at it like it was an old enemy because, in a way, it was. This wasn't just paperwork. This was doctrine. I'd seen it before, overseas, back when our job wasn't to fight. It was to reshape communities. Post-collect engagement zones, they called them. But we knew what it really was. Control through soft power. Change our signs. Change the rules. Changed the way people talk about their neighbors. And now it was here, in a 3-ring binder carried to my doorstep by a woman whose hobby was code enforcement cosplay. Langston pulled up 2 hours later. I didn't say anything at first, just slid the folder across the table. He opened it, flipped through page by page. "Where'd you get this?" She gave it to me on purpose. She said I'd kicked something I couldn't stop. Langston closed the folder. Then he called the county attorney. She came out same day, tough, sharp, wrote in with an investigator and a portable scanner. They took the folder apart, scanned every page, ran the headers, verified stamps. Then she looked at me. Did you know this program? I knew the people who built it. She blinked. You were in on this number, but I was in the room. The state got involved fast. Within 24 hours, we had a warrant. Karen's name was now tied to at least 5 separate cases across county lines, all involving false citations, impersonation, and real financial loss. The goal had always been land. Quietly push out rural owners, consolidate properties, enforce uniform standard stro scare tactics and bureaucracy. Karen wasn't the author. She was the test pilot. Langston and 2 agents rolled out the next morning, warrant in hand, cruiser out front, dash cam rolling. They knocked, nothing. Knocked again. Curtain shifted, but no answer. Finally, she opened it, wearing that same smug smirk. Clipboard in hand, like it had diplomatic immunity. Do you have a warrant? Langston held it up. Shouldn't even flinch. You're making a mistake. You first, he said, stepping. The search started in her study. Books, maps, a fake HOA ledger. Then there I'll find behind a false panel in the bookshelf, a narrow doorway, no knob, just a sliding latch. Inside a back office, it was surgical wall-to-wall binders. A whiteboard with names and faces, maps, schedules, rotation charts, a bank of monitors, all turned off. 3 of them had camera feeds still paused. One of those was my barn. There were 6 labeled binders, resident tier guide, compliance scripts, corrective language index, psychological and turd tactics, asset conversion model, Phase 3, strategy outline. Langston flipped through the first. Inside files on me, my name, my property layout, my habits. You wake up around 4:50 most mornings. Feed animals by 6. Occasionally leave lights on in the front room past midnight. Rarely seen with visitors. Pattern rating, defiant. Autonomous vigilance. Langston looked at me. They were profiling you. Not just me. Flipped again. 6 other names, other residents, all categorized. 1 labeled compliant. 1 labeled exit achieved. 1 labeled pending disruption. That last one, she'd moved out last month. They found a wall map in the back. 3 counties, red pins, blue pins, black pins, each labeled with a code. P1, probationary. P2, persuasion. P3, physical relocation. Encouraged, Langston stepped back. This isn't HOA. This is psychological warfare. We bag a The attorney filed charges that afternoon. Criminal harassment, wire fraud, identity manipulation, illegal surveillance, impersonating a public official, conspiracy to defraud. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it. Said it was a community experiment in grassroots. Langston called it what it was, a cult with a mailing list. That night someone knocked at my gate. Jerry, the neighbor who'd stopped waving. He looked broken. I didn't know it would go this far, he said. You believed her. He didn't answer, just looked at the dirt. She told us if we didn't help enforce it, we'd be next. He nodded once, closed the gate behind him. 2 days later, the county cracked the last hard drive, and what we saw blew the case wide open. Because it wasn't just me. There were files on 6 other properties. Video reports, drone footage, fencing audits, even voice recordings from porch conversations. These people didn't just want your land. They wanted to watch you first, predict you, control you, then erase you. And Karan, she wasn't the only node in the system. One of the signatures on the Phase 2 proposal was someone I knew, an old intel officer, retired. Last seen consulting in DC, I stared at it for a long time, not because I was shocked, because I knew exactly what kind of people they were and what they'd do to keep their blueprint from unraveling. One last drive was labeled Phase 4 Contingency. It was locked, encrypted, but the title said enough, because Phase 3 was about control and phase. For that meant someone was planning for failure resistance, and they were ready to act. Which meant I had one shot left before this thing went national and I was taking it hidden. The drone came back at 4:12 a.m. Same low hum, different model, faster, smaller, smarter. It didn't hover this time. It swept low across the barn roof, then buzzed the tree line and disappeared. 15 minutes later, I found a circle burned into the ground near the north fence. Perfectly symmetrical black paint. 2 lines cutting through the middle like an X-same symbol Langston found on the Clearwater property. Same one used on their non-compliant targets. It wasn't just a warning. It was a marking, and whatever it meant they were coming. They didn't knock. They didn't call. They didn't send another flyer. They just walked in. 3 of them, no headlights, no vehicle in sight. I spotted them on the southwest cam first. Thermal signatures said they'd been sitting in the woods for 20 minutes. Now they were approaching my driveway. Black vests, boots, walkie-talkies, muted. One held a clipboard. The other 2 had rifles. Real ones, clean, tightly slung. I didn't panic. I shut the laptop, locked the barn, walked calmly back to the porch, watched them, didn't speak. They didn't either. Then clipboard guy stepped forward. "We're here for seizure protocol. You think this is legal?" I asked. He didn't blink. "You failed to comply with re-education notices. Your vehicle and property are listed as forfeitable under emergency clause. B9. He pulled a page from his folder and held it up like it meant something. "You've been designated as a primary resistance node." The man to his right witched, kept glancing at the trees, kept adjusting his grip. The one on the left calm, to calm, eyes glassy, focused. Not on me. On the door behind me. "You're outnumbered," clipboard guy said. "Don't make this hard." I stepped forward 1 pace. "Tell me something," I said. "What? Who trained you?" He hesitated. That's when I knew they weren't real. Not law, not military. They were believers. They took another step forward. I stepped back, tapped Thessalon trigger on my watch. Steel barriers rose from the driveway with a low hiss. Motion sensors pinged. Floodlights engaged, not steady beams. Strobes red, disorienting, meant to confuse. Clipboard guy shielded his eyes. Twitchy guy raised his rifle. That was his mistake. My deck rig kicked in. 2 flashbangs deployed from opposite corners. No shrapnel, just pressure and loud enough to reset your brain for 30 seconds. They dropped, and just like that, my field turned into theirs. Except I'd planned for this. As they flailed, I moved under the side stair, rolled right, hit the failsafe line I hadn't tested in 2 years. A buried cable set to trigger an old theft deterrent system I had rigged for across the field, 4 directional sirens fired up, piercing, oscillating, frequency coded to bounce off the barn and scatter echoes. The sound disoriented them instantly. Twitchy guy staggered, rifle half raised, blind. I closed the distance, grabbed the barrel, twisted, drove his shoulder into the gravel with my full weight. He didn't even fight. The Calmoni turned to run, but stopped cold. Langston's cruiser had arrived. No siren, no lights, just his voice. Weapons down now. He stepped out, sidearm drawn. Back up behind him. Real awe, real response. Clipboard guy tried to reach for something. Langston fired a warning shot. Not into the air, into the dirt. A puff of dust between the man's. He froze. I said now. They dropped their weapons, all of them. 4 more emerged from the woods, hands raised. 7 in total, armed, trained, poorly, but enough to be dangerous. Langston cuffed the first one, turned to me. They said they were part of something bigger. I nodded. They're not bluffing. Karen, her playbook, her language, her followers. Langston held up a badge he had pulled off one of their vests. Enforcement Tier 1. Phase 4 certified. You know what that means? Edo now. At the station, they processed all 7. Most of them wouldn't talk, but the quiet one did. Right before they loaded him into the cruiser, he looked at me through the bars, smiled. Phase 4 isn't about you. I didn't speak. You think it ends here. You think this was about land. He leaned closer to the. It's about pattern disruption. You're not the enemy. You're the prototype. Then he winked and they took him away. We found more on them. Forged IDs, maps, training schedules. One of them had a printed set of instructions for emergency engagement scenarios. Another had a laminated citizen arrest. But the most disturbing find, a group photo, 10 people, all in vests, all with fake patches. Karen in the middle and a title above it, Phase 4, Ground Team, Unit 7, which meant there were at least 6 more. Langston and I stood on the porch later that night, Max at my feet. The air still hadn't shifted. You think they'll come again? He asked. They won't stop, I said. Not until this goes public or I disappear. He looked at me sideways. You have a plan? I nodded toward Thelliston Cracked Drive on my table. It's labeled with my name. You going to open it? Not yet. He waited. What are y'all waiting for? I looked out across the field. Leverage, because inside that drive was the final piece. And once I opened it, once I saw what they had on me, I wouldn't just be defending my land. I'd be dragging the truth out of the shadows. And it wouldn't just end Curran's legacy. It might end mine. The last drive didn't come with a label, just my name. Callahan sharpied in block letters. No logo, no date, no context. It sat on my kitchen table for 4 days. Not because I was scared, but because I knew once I opened it, once I saw what was on it, there'd be no going back. Langston offered to run it through evidence systems. I said no. If they'd spent this much time watching me, then they deserved to see me watching back. When I finally clicked it open, the screen flashed once, then I looked. OP-RM, Operational Rural Management. Not HOA, not county, not Karen, federal. A program I hadn't heard mentioned in a decade. I knew the name because I'd helped write part of it. 12 years ago, I'd submitted a report, outlined weaknesses in rural common structures, suggested techniques for post-instability recalibration. They hadn't just used Myaport, they'd built this entire framework from it. The drive held 4 folders. Phase 1, infiltration. Phasito conditioning. Phase 3, pressure. Phase 4, correction. Inside, me, drone footage, porch cams, audio from the barn, conversations with Lang. Every file had a label. Subject, Callahan, classification, autonomous, strategic, influence resistant. Then came the recording. My own voice, a call from years ago, outlining protocol for managing outlier behavior clusters. They didn't just weaponize a system against me. They used my own damn blueprints. Next were the personnel files. Karen's HOA presidency funded, promoted, managed. Her flyers, her committees, her compliance task force, all part of a beta rollout under a shell non-profit. She wasn't the architect. She was the instrument. And I wasn't the enemy. I was the test. Then came the final file. Message, tier, alpha. Karen appeared on screen. Clean, calm, smiling like this was a church announcement. If you're watching this, then you saw the truth. I didn't start this, but I believed in it. Still do. People like you, you don't obey. You disrupt. That's why we needed you. You showed us what resistance looks like and how to break it. Then she smiled and the screen cut to black. I sat in silence. Not because I was broken, because I was. Langston showed up an hour later. You opened it. I nodded. How bad? Bad enough. He waited. What now? I end it. I didn't go to the press. I went to the source, filed a federal whistleblower complaint, redacted the neighbors, named the contractors. Attached every file. Then I hit publish. The story went wide. Former employees came forward. Oversight hearings opened. Karen was indicted again, this time on federal charges, and OPRM officially decommissioned again. But paperwork doesn't stop ideology. Things are quiet now. Max still limps, but he runs. Theburn holds. The goats yell. The fences stay up. But the weight, it doesn't leave. Sometimes Max growls when a truck slows at the gate. It never stops. But it never doesn't pause. I still get messages from strangers. It started here, too. They called it a volunteer. The documents looked real. We thought we were the only ones. They asked me what to do. I always say the same thing. Don't wait for someone else to fight your battle, because if they've already drawn the map, you're already on it. There was one final email buried in the drive. Encrypted. We cracked it. No body, no signature, just a subject line, reassignment, pilot zone, Midwest beta, no explanation, no attachments, just not Simmons Valley. Somewhere colder, somewhere flatter, somewhere even easier to disappear, because Phase 4 didn't end here. It just moved down the list. They thought I was the variable, the disruption, but I wasn't.